We're going to be installing this rear wheel hub bearing on this 2012 Hyundai Elantra. With a 21mm socket, we're going to remove the rear tire. We're going to remove our caliper from the bracket so we can get to the pads and the rotor. We're going to do that with these two guide pins here, 14mm bolts. We'll remove those now. If you can get on this with the socket, go ahead. If not, you can grab a wrench. We're going to use a pry bar in here and just try and work our caliper out. All right, once you have your caliper free of the pads, you're going to hang this out of the way without putting any stress on this line. To do that, we're going to use a caliper hanger. Now that we have our caliper free, we can go ahead and remove our brake pads on our rotor here. We're just going to use that same pry bar, put it up against the metal backing, and just give it a couple of taps. We can rotate that out. These pads have been worn down very thin. There isn't a lot of space in here to get in and twist. You can hammer this in if you want. If you are replacing the rotors and the pads, you can go ahead and do that. Another way is to take your pry tool or flathead screwdriver, come in from the top front, and just push outward. And rotate that out. Now we can remove our caliper bracket. It's held on by two bolts. These are 14mm bolts. So with a 14mm socket and a breaker bar, we'll remove those now. All right, with the Phillips screwdriver, you're going to remove these two screws. There's one here, and there should be one here, but our vehicle has one that's been broken off. We're going to start with the one we can get to. What you'll also need to do, since the wheel is spinning, is you'll need to lock down the wheel somehow. We're going to use a pry bar and wedge it in so that our wheel doesn't rotate. All right, so we were going to take out our second Phillips head screw, but before we received the vehicle, somebody broke it off, or it broke off. So what we did is took a sledge and just hit our rotor a couple of times to break it off, and it broke free, and we can slide it right out. All right, so we're going to remove our speed sensor here, 10mm socket. Just be cautious. These bolts sometimes break, as well as the sensor itself. So with the speed sensor bolt out, if you rock it a little bit, you see it wants to come out. That speed sensor is down inside there. So you want to be very careful of prying this out. I'm going to try and get in from the bolt side, get as close into the sensor as you can and just pry upwards. Again, being very careful. It's slowly coming out. There it is. There's an O-ring here. This is usually what's stopping it from coming out. You can see this one's been in here for a while. We'll just clean that up. All right, so now we have 4 bolts holding our hub bearing assembly on. They're 12 millimeters. If you can get in here with a very shallow socket, go ahead and do that. I have a wrench. We're going to break these free all the way around. With a 12 millimeter socket and an extension, you can go right through the hub. All right, so we're going to use a sledgehammer and try and hit this hub out. I'm going to try that first. Because all the bolts are out, if this comes free, it will come flying off. So what we're going to do is thread in 2 bolts, just a few threads. You don't have to go crazy. What this will do is stop the hub from flying off, crushing your toes. Now we can take these 2 bolts out. Again, just be careful that hub doesn't fall out. At this point, I just like to keep one hand on the hub at all times. And with a small pry bar, you can take it out the rest of the way. Just work it left and right. There are 2 pins right here on one on each side. This is what's holding it up now. So we're just going to work it off the pins. Again, left and right. So it comes off equal. All right, so we're going to put a little anti-seize around the outside flange here. We don't need the anti-seize in the middle where the hub goes. I'm just going to put a rag in there. Just give this a quick light coat. You're going to want to take and reuse your old piece from the back of your old hub. Your new hub will not come with one. In this case, we're going to reuse this one. I suggest you replace it if it looks like this. We're going to reuse this. Put this in place. So now we're going to take our new hub. We're going to slide this right in. Make sure you take note of the direction of the pins. You cannot flip that, it won't fit. So we'll put it in the right orientation. We'll slide it over the pins and seat it back. Now we're going to reinstall our bolts. A 12 millimeter socket. You can start them by hand. Just grab our impact gun, just tighten them down, just snug them up. I want to hold that bearing assembly kind of centered. And we're going to go in a crisscross pattern just to center this and seat it in evenly. Again, we're not tightening them all the way down, we're just snugging them up. Now we're going to torque down these bolts. I'm going to torque them to 40 foot-pounds. And again, we're just going to crisscross. All right, so now we're going to install our speed sensor. Make sure there's no debris on it. All right, what I like to do to kind of help seat that O-ring is a little bit, just grab a pair of pliers, whatever you can, on the outside here. And just push that down best you can. Reinstall our bolt. Tighten that down. All right, now we're going to torque down our speed sensor bolt. It'll be 6 foot-pounds. We're going to spray some anti-seize on this surface that the rotor will mount to. And then we'll go ahead, line up our 2 screw holes, slide our rotor into place. All right, so now that we have our rotor in place, secured in by 1 lug nut, we'll go ahead and put our Phillips screw in. Now that that screws in, you can take this lug nut off. That screw's holding on the rotor. This is when you would put your second Phillips screw in to attach the rotor to the hub. Our vehicle came with that screw broken. We do not have another one to put in. But if you do have it and it's not broken, go ahead and install it now. So now we can reinstall our caliper bracket. So slide that over the rotor and reinstall our 2 bolts. All right, so now with a 14mm socket, we'll tighten these down. We're just going to snug them up. So now we'll torque these caliper bolts down. It'll be 50 foot-pounds. Install our pads. I'm going to start with the back. Slide this bottom tab into the channel and just rotate the front into place. And do the same on the front. Put that bottom tab in, line up the front and push into place. Take our caliper off our hanger. Now with our piston compressed, we can slide our caliper on. We will replace caliper bolts. Now we can torque these down to 50 foot-pounds. All right, so now we can reinstall our wheel. I'm just going to put our lug nuts on and get a couple of threads going by hand. Now with our 21mm socket, we'll just snug these up. You want to do a crisscross pattern. And now we're going to torque these down to 70 foot-pounds. We're going to do that in a crisscross pattern.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.